Alright, y'all, so this video is not really related to any of the content that I have and will continue to put on this channel, but what it is an introduction to my other channel that I'm getting ready to start putting content on. I've alluded to it a number of times on this channel, and for those of you who are watching this video and have seen my other videos, you should already know what I'm referring to, but for those of you who may be new or who don't know what I'm talking about, this new channel that I'm referring to is my biblical channel. And on this new channel, I'm going to basically be talking about and covering a myriad of topics that I feel like are essential to so-called black people's understanding of the scriptures, since they are essentially about us. Most of the history of the Bible, as well as its many other aspects, aren't quite explained well enough to the degree that our people need to have them explained to us. And this is why we have such a low level understanding of the Bible, or at least most of us do. You have so-called blacks that go to the Christian church system, where they are taught to view the Bible through a primarily emotional and therapeutic lens, where they just thump through it looking for a verse or verses that make them feel better about themselves, or some hardship that they may be going through. Okay, and then you also have the so-called blacks that believe that the Bible is just another rendition of the ancient Kemetic, Babylonian, Canaanite belief systems, that the figures of the Bible are just based off of ancient gods or goddess figures from one of those pantheons. So they'll go off and they'll adhere to the ancient Kemetic belief system, or they'll start to claim descent from the ancient Egyptians, and they'll take on their ancient belief systems, right? Wearing things like an Ankh necklace and getting Kemetic tattoos and stuff like that, like the Eye of Horus or something, and wearing all types of Luciferian symbology and believing in Luciferian ideologies. And then lastly, there are the group of so-called blacks that will denounce the Bible because they believe it was written for and by the quote-unquote white man. Okay, therefore making it the white man's book, since it was authorized to be translated in the English language by an alleged so-called Caucasian man in King James, who most of you guys who are in the knowledge should know by now. King James was not a so-called Caucasian man, but that would be something for another day. But yeah, you have these different groups of so-called blacks that have these preconceived notions about the Bible and what it's about, and what all of them have in common is that they have is that they've never really read the Bible. For number one, they haven't read it enough to make the assertions that they make about its content, or have the preconceived ideals that they have about what it's pertaining to. All right, most of them are just going based off of what someone else has told them about the Bible, and not off of their own knowledge and understanding. But this channel will act as a resource for so-called black people, and even just people in general, but mainly so-called blacks of the Americas and wherever else our people are scattered at, to gain a greater knowledge base about these scriptures and a better understanding of where our people come from according to the Bible, because once again, it's primarily written for us and by us. Okay, so with that being said, I'm just going to briefly go over the symbology of the logo that I have decided to use for my channel, as well as the name of my channel and what it represents, and why it is essential to understand before watching any of my videos on the channel. So the name of my biblical channel is The Lion and the Unicorn, and the emblem is of a lion on the left, as you can see right here, with a crown atop his head, and a stance that is known as the Gardant, while holding up the crest in the middle. And on the right is a unicorn with a crown on its neck, while also, like the lion, is holding up the crest in the middle. And as for the crest in the middle of these two creatures, we see two sets of three gold lions within the two red backgrounds. And then in the upper right hand corner, another lion is seen standing in a stance that is known as the quote-unquote lion rampant, which means about to strike or attack. And then in the lower left hand corner, there is a gold harp. Okay, so there's a lot of symbology just in this one image, and you guys may have seen something like this, something along the lines of this image right here, especially if you have been to Europe, if you have traveled to Europe, specifically England or Scotland. You may have seen this image before, or if you have seen the alleged quote-unquote royal family on the news, they may have briefly showed this symbol before while following around quote-unquote Queen Elizabeth II or quote-unquote King Charles III. Okay, but for those of you who don't know what this image or what this image is or what it represents, it is the heraldry for the United Kingdom of Great Britain, which was brought together in 1603 by King James VI/1, and this specific crest was meant to commemorate this coming together of both the kingdoms of England and Scotland, as well as Ireland, under the rule of King James, who gained the right to rule over both of these kingdoms immediately after the death of Queen Elizabeth I, who had previously ruled over both England and Ireland. But beyond this crest being symbolic of the coming together of the kingdoms of England, Scotland, and Ireland, it has an even deeper and more meaningful understanding in regards to not only what it symbolizes for our people today, but what it symbolized for our ancestors who lived during the medieval time period all the way back to ancient times, or what some people might call quote-unquote biblical times. And it was in these quote-unquote biblical times where the origin of these symbols for our people, the images of the lion and the unicorn, were given to the main branches of Israel that would come to represent the two kingdoms of Israel. So now let's see, according to the scriptures, what these two animals were meant to symbolize. And some of you guys who are watching this may already understand the relevance of these two animals as it pertains to the nation of Israel. But again, this is just an introduction to my biblical channel and an explanation of why I chose this specific symbol and the title of this channel. Okay, but now let's get into and take a look at first the lion and what it was meant to symbolize according to the scriptures. So now first we're going to take a look at this verse in Genesis, the 49th chapter, and we're going to start at about the 8th verse. And just to give a brief background of what is going on right now in this verse, Jacob, who is of course the progenitor of the 12 tribes of Israel, is about to die, and he is lying on his deathbed. But before he dies, he gives one last message to his sons pertaining to what the future will hold for their descendants based off of a vision he received from the Most High. So we're just going to start here at verse 8 because this will give us what we need in order to see what the symbolism of the lion was meant to represent. So now let's read. So Judah, thou art he who thine brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as an old lion who shall rouse him up. The scepter shall never depart or not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Okay, so we see that the lion is referenced numerous times throughout this portion of the scripture, and Judah's father Jacob uses the lion as a symbol for him. So of course this would mean that Judah is represented as the lion, and that the descendants of the tribe of Judah represented themselves with the Lion of Judah as well. And we can see this all throughout history with the medieval empires in the United Kingdom or England, Scotland, and Ireland, right? Also in Spain, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, etc. All of these nations of people that split up and went to these different areas in Europe and ruled during the medieval time period were the descendants of the tribe of Judah, and they knew this to be true, which is why they presented their primary coat of arms with the lion as their symbolic animal. And as my biblical channel progresses forward, I will show how the European royalty descended from the nation of Israel and how they themselves knew this to be true and were able to trace their own lineage back to the 12 tribes of Israel. But again, that will be for later. But now let's take a look at what the scriptures state about the quote-unquote unicorn and what it represents. And the unicorn symbology is a bit more nuanced than the symbol of the lion in regards to what the exact animal was meant to be represented by that term unicorn. Of course, to us today, the quote-unquote unicorn is a mythological creature that is embedded all throughout various ancient mythologies, mainly going back to ancient Greek mythology, but its origins really go back to ancient Mesopotamia or ancient Mesopotamian mythology as well. But again, to us, the unicorn is wholly a mythological creature, and this is what gives most people the the license who aren't really learned enough in the scriptures to try and state that with the existence of the unicorn being prevalent in the scriptures, they'll try and use that to justify the Bible as being a book of fairy tales and mythology, which leads them to linking the Bible and the figures in the Bible like the Most High and Christ with the other ancient mythologies like Greek mythology and ancient Mesopotamian mythology, as well as ancient Egyptian mythology, so on and so forth, while also equating the Most High to other quote-unquote sky father deities like Zeus or Amun, and then even Christ to the quote-unquote reborn mythological versions of Osiris like Horus or Apollo. And all of this conflation and confusion mainly derives from people's misunderstanding of the Bible, along with their lack of knowledge when it comes to the differences that exist between the Bible and these other mythologies, which is why it is important for people to have an understanding of the origins of words and phrases, especially words that have as much history as the term unicorn does. Okay, but before we get into the origins of what the term unicorn meant, let's see where in the scriptures this creature is mentioned and what tribe from Israel it was meant to symbolize. So now this is Deuteronomy chapter 33 verses 17, and again, just to give you guys some background of what's going on at this particular moment, Moses this time is about to die, and he, similar to Jacob in this verse, is speaking in symbolic language and is trying to communicate to the tribes of Israel what will come of them and their descendants in the future, and what each tribe's roles will be going forward until the last days. But to get what we need, we're just going to see what Moses said about the tribes that descended from Jacob's second youngest and favorite son, Joseph, who are, for those of you who don't know, the half-breed tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. So now let's read what he says, and we're going to start at verse 13. So, and of Joseph he said, Blessed of the Lord be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew, and for the deep that couches beneath, and for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon, and for the chief things of the ancient mountains, and for the precious things of the lasting hills, and for the precious things of the earth, and fullness thereof, and for the good will of him that dwelt in the bush. Let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph, and upon the top of his head, and upon the top of the head of him that was separated from his brethren. His glory, talking about Joseph and his sons, is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. Okay, so we see here that both of the sons of Joseph are represented as the horns of a unicorn, i.e. two or multiple horns, right? So just right off the bat, before we get into the etymology of this word unicorn, we should already be able to see that the quote-unquote unicorn that the scripture is referencing can't be the one from mythology, right? Because the mythological unicorn has only one horn, as is evidenced by its name, unicorn, right? Uni means one, but in this verse, the term unicorn is being used to refer to an animal that has multiple horns, plural, and the number of horns isn't stated up front, but there is a clue that this verse gives us at the end, where it states, and there are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and there are the thousands of Manasseh. So the they at the beginning is in reference to the horns being analogized as the two sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. So it should be obvious that the animal that is being referenced here is an animal with two horns, right? And there are many real animals in the animal kingdom that have two horns, but let's look at the translation of this word, quote unquote unicorn, so that we can see exactly what animal this word was actually describing. So now first we're going to look at the Blue Letter Bible's definition of what animal this word unicorn was meant to represent according to the ancient translation of the word. So now let's see real quick what it says here. So we can see under the section where it says KJV translation count, about 4 tabs down, it states that the KJV or King James Version translates this ancient Hebrew word as unicorn 9 different times all throughout the Bible. So I just wanted to show that to confirm that this is indeed the same word that was utilized in Deuteronomy chapter 33 and 17. Because when we look at the very top, the way this word was originally written looks nothing like how unicorn is written. The pronunciation is also nowhere near the same as unicorn, as we can see. So the word is pronounced as reame, I believe. So obviously a much different word from unicorn. So now let's go down a bit and see what the definition of this word is. So under outline of biblical passage, probably the great aurochs or wild bulls, which are now extinct. The exact meaning is not known, so this definition tells us what the meaning of unicorn is supposed to be in reference to. It was in reference to an ancient extinct animal called an auroch, which was just an ancient bull or even an ox. As we can see at the very bottom of this page, it defines the animal to be a buffalo. Alright, so now all of these animals obviously have two horns, right? Which is right in line with what the verse in Deuteronomy chapter 33 and 17 states about the horns being represented of the two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. So it's obvious that the animal had to have been one with two horns. But now let's just look at one more definition for the term unicorn as it was used in Deuteronomy chapter 33 and 17. So now this is the Briticana definition of the term that was used in the scriptures to describe the animal that will be used to describe what will come of the two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. So let's read this real quick, and we're only going to really look at the first two sentences, not the whole thing. But anyway, let's read this. So starting at the top, certain poetical passages of the Bible refer to a strong and splendid horned animal called Re'im. This word was translated unicorn or rhinoceros in many versions of the Bible, but many modern translations prefer wild ox or aurochs, which is the correct meaning of the Hebrew re'im. So we see here that once again the term unicorn is equated to a wild animal that has two horns, reinforcing the notion that the unicorn that was mentioned was not the same mythological creature we know of today. It was a real animal that existed and it also had two horns. Now, the first animal that this definition gives is a rhinoceros, and the theory of the rhinoceros actually being the animal that was referenced in Deuteronomy chapter 33 and 17, even though this translation has somewhat been discredited. It does make sense when we look at the verse and what it says about the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, and how Ephraim would preside over a bigger portion of Israel than Manasseh, due to him receiving the greater blessing from Jacob in Genesis chapter 48. But that will be another story for another day. But just getting back to the point right here, yes, the rhinoceros does make sense, but like this article says, most scholars today translate the meaning of quote-unquote unicorn in the scriptures to mean the ancient, long extinct bull or ox-like animal known as the aurochs. So now let's get an idea of what this animal looked like, so we can get an even greater understanding of why, once again, the two half tribes that came from Joseph, called Ephraim and Manasseh, were likened unto the horns of this bull-like animal. So now this right here is a skeleton of the extinct aurochs, and this ancient animal clearly had two distinct big horns protruding from its head, which falls right in line with what the verse in Deuteronomy 33 and 17 says pertaining to the analogy of the two horns of the quote-unquote unicorn being the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. So that analogy makes far more sense when we look at the animal that was actually meant to be mentioned in this verse. Okay, and then just for confirmation of what the ancient aurochs bull looked like, here is a prehistoric cave painting of one that was found in the Lascaux, I believe it's called Lascaux cave in France, that was said to have been painted about 10,000 years ago. And once again, we can see that the ancients also depicted this animal with two horns protruding from its head. So again, the analogy of the quote-unquote unicorn was meant to symbolize the two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, and the significance of these two tribes is also given in Deuteronomy chapter 33 and 17, where it states, with them, talking about the two horns, i.e. the two tribes, he shall push the people together. So now, for those of you who don't know, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, but mainly the tribe of Manasseh, was the tribe that was chosen to rule and preside over a certain segment of the tribes of Israel. This occurrence happened mainly after the separation of the tribes of Israel into two kingdoms, and again, this will be something that I talk about in far more detail as the channel progresses. But long story short, King Solomon caused the kingdom of Israel, which was before a unified state under Solomon's father, who was of course King David, to split apart due to a lot of the idolatry and other unlawful acts that he was taking part in. Which led to the Most High splitting the kingdom of Israel in two, and these kingdoms became known as the Southern Kingdom, which comprised mainly the tribes of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, and then the other kingdom became known as the Northern Kingdom, and it was comprised of the other 10 remaining tribes apart from Judah and Benjamin. So, like of course the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, and then also the tribes of Issachar, Naphtali, Zebulun, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Dan, Levi, and Simeon, and of these 10 tribes in the northern kingdom, the tribe of Ephraim was given the right to rule first, starting with their first king, Jeroboam, and then after him it kind of spiraled out of control, and many different kings derived from other tribes, but still the 10 tribes were given into the hands of Ephraim. And this is the main reason why in verses like Genesis the 48th chapter, Jacob blessed Ephraim over Manasseh, even though Manasseh was the eldest son and the one who was supposed to receive the greater blessing from their grandfather Jacob. Jacob instead gave Ephraim the greater blessing, and this trickled all the way down to the prophecy that we see Moses giving in Deuteronomy 33 and 17, specifically when he says they are the 10,000s of Ephraim and they are the thousands of Manasseh. That part accentuates Ephraim as again being the tribe that received the greater portion of the blessing from Jacob, and the tribe that would have the right to rule over the northern kingdom first. But again, I'll explain all of that in greater detail as my channel progresses. But just getting back to the unicorn symbolism on my logo and on this crest, it should be clear by now that the so-called unicorn that was displayed on this medieval crest was meant to indicate the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, but mainly Ephraim, who just like Judah was the main tribe of the southern kingdom of Israel that I briefly went over. Ephraim and Manasseh were the main, but the Ephraim and Manasseh were the main tribes that comprised the northern kingdom. And of course, their symbol was the quote-unquote unicorn, as we just read in Deuteronomy 33 and 17. So now it should make more sense what the components of my logo and the crest of the United Kingdom of Britain mean, right? It represents the coming together of both kingdoms of Israel, the southern kingdom, which was made up of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and those two tribes are represented by the Lion of Judah, and then of course the northern kingdom was made up of the other 10 tribes of Israel, and they were represented by the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, okay, whose symbol was and still is the quote-unquote unicorn or aurochs. So this will be something that I will go over more and more over the course of this channel's existence, and over the course of the series that I have planned for this channel. But yeah, that's basically a summary of what the basis behind my logo is, and it will make far more sense the more videos I make and the more I get into the intricacies of the history of the so-called black man and black woman who are the descendants of the nation of Israel. So I will post the link to my biblical channel below. Please go ahead and subscribe, hit the notification bell button so that you can be notified about upcoming videos that I will be posting on that channel, and even be sure to check out my other recent videos, which are the last couple ones I did on the ancient Egyptians. And once again, the next video series I'm going to work on I'm working on right now for this channel, for the channel that I originally made, this channel right here, will be the introduction into the medieval time period, starting with the Byzantine Empire and then moving on to the other medieval empires that were of course ruled by so-called black people, such as the Holy Roman Empire, the dynasties in places, and then also the dynasties in places like England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Poland, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc. And these videos will have a direct correlation with the videos that I do on my biblical channel, since a lot of these empires were of course ruled over by so-called blacks that descended from the nation of Israel. So if you want that synchronicity, again, I advise you guys to go and subscribe to my biblical channel, and hopefully I'll see you guys over there. And of course you'll see my next video when I post it in the next coming weeks on this channel.